Welcome into the Door Report. It is episode 208. It is a Monday night, February 27th, 2023. We are powered by Alaco Fine Wood Floors, family owned and operated for more than 2 decades. Alaco Fine Wood Floors is Nashville and Middle Tennessee's choice for premium quality hardwood floors. Since 1995, Jimmy Alaco and his army of employees have embodied the approach of taking pride in one's craft and providing superior customer service, growing from a one-man shop to a team of 23 professionals who share the founder's passion for quality craftsmanship and customer satisfaction. You can find them out in Berry Hill. Give them a call at 615-356-0303 or log on to their website. That's alacofinewoodfloors.com. Alongside Will Byrum, Trevor Hulan, I am Billy Derrick, and today we are going to be talking a lot. We've got a lot to get to, a lot of Vandy athletics. We will sadly rehash the LSU loss down in Baton Rouge, and we'll discuss what that loss means and kind of the mood around the team and the fan base. And guys, they got a dominant win over Florida, though. So we're going to dive into that and sort of what that means, if anything. Talk about Vanderbilt's trip to Lexington up at Rupp Arena. We'll get to some fan comments and questions, and then a little bit of baseball talk. Big series win over UCLA. Trevor Hulan was in attendance. We're going to get a report from, I guess, our Vandy baseball insider. He had a recap over the weekend, so stay in touch with Trevor Hulan on Twitter for all your baseball needs. But guys, how are the vibes? Will, I'll start with you. That Florida win, did that help at all after the agony down in Baton Rouge that the team suffered, but also you?
No. So I didn't even watch the Florida game. People were very focused on the gambling side of things. Really, money, whatever. Like I have like a set aside amount of gambling money. I'm not doing great. I'm hurt, dog. Like, no, not a doubt in my mind. Like the Ed Reed halftime, like I'm hurt, dog. Don't ask me if I'm all right. Hell no. Like that's how I feel. But $700, whatever. I felt more like an idiot for buying in to this hype train when I should have just stuck with the initial take that I had, which was the only thing predictable and consistent about the Jerry Stackhouse era is unpredictability and inconsistency. And that is exactly what we saw. You lost to the 157th team at the time in the NCAA net rankings. I know it was on the road. It was an incredible performance from an individual LSU player. But at this point in the season, already struggling with an early season home Q4 loss hanging over your head, that LSU game was it. That was a must win, and more than a must win, a can't lose. Because anything you do in these last 3 games of the regular season isn't going to make up enough of the deficit that you were already in, of the hole you had already dug yourself. Right. You didn't have the opportunity to slip up like that against an opponent like LSU. The 3-1 record, we actually made a reference to it. There are very different 3-1 records in this stretch. And the number one thing I think we said kind of flippantly was they can't lose to LSU. And what did they do? They came out midweek, dead crowd, on the road, definition of a trap game. 1-13 in the conference, LSU was. Probably the worst SEC basketball team that we've seen since the Vanderbilt team that went 0-18, in all honesty. And
that's what we said,
went out and you lost. I mean, they lost. They started out, up 11-3 against LSU.
I think so,
and then from that point on, LSU kind of dominated the rest of the game. Vanderbilt was kind of sleepwalking. I said that they would have to play their D- game and LSU would have to play their A game, and that's what happened, unfortunately. In that game, is Vanderbilt didn't play an F game. They played a D game, a D-, and you got LSU's best shot, probably their best game of the year. I knew it was over when the announcer made the comment going to commercial break or at the end of halftime and said something along the lines of, and this is probably one of the best performances we've seen from this LSU squad all year. And I was like, because of course it is. And it was like, let's see if they can keep it up in the second half. And I was like, yep, I bet they'll keep it up, pal. Like I can almost guarantee, because old Willie has $700 on the line on this game. So that was the absolute death knell in an already troublesome game that was on the schedule that we kind of honestly breezed over. And it looked like Stackhouse and the squad did too. and the season for all intents and purposes is over. I mean, there's no NCAA tournament bid or at-large bid on the line anymore.
No.
I think even winning out, which is a big if because you're playing number 20 in the NCAA net rankings, Kentucky, and number 40 or 41 Mississippi State, like winning out still isn't going to be enough. Winning out and winning your first round SEC tournament game isn't going to be enough to get you in. So at this point, you have to win the SEC tournament. So I couldn't bring myself to watch the Florida game and watch the opportunity that this team had just be a shell of itself. What Memorial could have been during that Florida game, man. The potential for the atmosphere in that gym and what that team could have had on the line. Everything was kind of breaking in place. Kentucky had been getting hot, so it would give Vanderbilt kind of a no-risk, high-reward opportunity to get another signature win this time on the road. Everything was lining up, and they blew it. And, I mean, there's no other way to put it. They completely blew the opportunity. So, Trevor, I'm sure you have a not-so-optimistic outlook as well, but I guess I'll swing it over to you to continue to rain on Vanderbilt fans' parades who somehow were still hyped up for that Florida game.
Somehow.
I mean, yeah, I did watch the Florida game. I didn't attend. I could have attended because I had a ticket and I was also at Hawkins for the baseball game. And I literally could have taken, after the game ended, I could have taken literally 15 steps and I would have been inside Memorial because I was sitting in the outfield. I did not go. I did watch, though. Whenever we were talking about the stretch that Vanderbilt was going to have, I mean, like you said, Will, we said that they could afford one loss probably, and it couldn't be like a blowout, but like you could afford best case scenario.
We didn't even mention
a loss to Kentucky wasn't even a possibility. A loss to LSU literally was not a possibility, and I don't want to be like a doom and gloom guy, but a loss to LSU, Vanderbilt fans, I'm sorry. That was legitimately the worst case scenario. That was the guillotine right there that just got Vanderbilt's head chopped off. And I'm not like, that's not an exaggeration. Like Vanderbilt, like you said, Will, early season losses, they dug themselves into a hole, and the net and Ken Palm and whatever the powers it be really, really didn't like that and was giving Vanderbilt a really hard time to advance over stuff that happened months ago. Losing to an LSU team at this bad, at this point in the season, whenever you factor on the recency bias, you legitimately cannot come back from it. If you're asking about a tournament opportunity right now, you have to win the SEC championship. There's no even if you beat Kentucky and you beat Mississippi State, and like let's say you get to the championship but you don't win, I'm sorry, like we're not getting in. Like it's just a fact.
Vanderbilt is the poster child for a team that will present well when you just look at their record, who they've beaten, who they've played. But in the NCAA net rankings, everything they have done this season is wrong. Is like the maximum punishment and the minimum reward. So I dug into it more because we were like really shitting on the NCAA net rankings last pod, and I really wanted to make sure that I had it down. So it weights into account. I think the number 3 portion of it is the opponents, because I'm using my phone as my hotspot. All my notes are on my phone. Having to remember off the top of my head, not great. But it weights home losses and away wins at like 1.4x. Neutral is 1, and then away wins or home whatever. So it ultra weights home losses, away wins, and puts like 0.6x value on home wins and away losses. Right. So Vanderbilt not only has the Q4, it's then multiplied by being at home. Yeah. And every win that they have had has been within 2-3 point margin last second buzzer beater for their signature wins against Auburn and Tennessee, both at home, minimum scoring margin, minimum weight in how the NCAA puts it in there. So that's Vanderbilt's critical wins on their just written down resume look pretty solid. You have wins over Tennessee and Auburn. You're sitting here late in the season on a pretty good stretch run, a win over Florida when they had Colin Castleton on the road, and a win at home without Colin Castleton for Florida. But just every factor that they use in the analytics, Vanderbilt rates really, really poorly. They're still sitting at 87th. I mean, they were sitting at that before losing to LSU or around that range. And that just puts another anchor of a Q3 loss just sitting on their resume. And I don't think most Vanderbilt fans, because it's LSU, and this will be the last thing I say, Billy, sorry for
no, you're good.
Kind of taking your spot here. But
No,
LSU is sitting at 155 after the Vanderbilt win, like I said. And people keep pointing to the Grambling State loss. That's what everyone keeps pointing to is, yes, it's a Q4 loss, but barely. Grambling State is 197, 17-8 this season, just for context here. And Georgia sitting at 147. So I know there's the Q3, Q4 differential, but I don't think just because people have in their mind that LSU's not a bad basketball program, and normally they're not, this was a horrible loss. I know it was on the road, and I know it's an in-conference opponent, but in the analytics, which is what matters, and I'm not saying I agree with it, it is, like you said, Trevor, the absolute worst-case scenario. It was the only team that they couldn't lose to. Mississippi State would have hurt and would have had to, and maybe probably would have forced them to win one SEC tournament game in order to feel at least pretty decent about getting it at large. Once they lose to LSU, it's over. And that not that I hope I'm wrong. I hope they win an SEC tournament game and get an at-large bid. But I don't think I am. I don't think I'm wrong. And I don't think, Trevor, you're wrong, Billy. I don't know where you stand here, but I'm imagining it might be along the lines of where me and Trevor sit.
Yeah, I mean, let's face it. Vandy has their at-large chances are zero at this point. I mean, they have to go and win the SEC tournament to have any shot. We got a question. Braden asked us that on Twitter. We answered it, and there it is. So, but guys, going back to the winning streak, I want to throw this out there. The numbers didn't match up with what Vanderbilt had been doing. Like they were on a 5-game winning streak, playing really well. Now they didn't have a really convincing win, but you would look at the numbers like, why are they 90 in the net still? Why are they, why do their stats not really line up with what they've been doing? This LSU loss explains it. Because this Vanderbilt team, most of the season, they're on their worst night, they're bad enough to lose to a Grambling State or an LSU. But on their best night, they can go beat Tennessee. They can beat an Auburn. I think on their best night, they could beat Kentucky and hell, maybe Alabama. So there's nothing convincing about this team this year, guys. I think that's sort of where I draw the line here, where even their wins. I mean, what was the most convincing win they've had? It's hard. I mean, usually those are easy to say. Oh, that was it. It's not with this team. I mean, maybe the Arkansas game.
Maybe this past Florida game.
Honestly, probably, yeah.
I mean,
and that guys,
it's hard to judge Florida after they basically, their season's over at this point. The impact that has to morale on the team and on the roster is a lot to do with that, as well as Castleton being out. But not only just that, I mean, they basically look like they kind of packed it in.
Yeah, and real quick before we move on to, I know we've gotten into all this LSU stuff. We'll get to the Florida game a little bit, but did you guys catch what Stackhouse said after the game? Aria Gerson tweeted about it. He was asked about, playing after a lot of the older guys. Yeah, after the Florida game.
Yeah,
after the Florida game.
God, this quote.
Aria Gerson tweeted it, and I think I lost, a section of my brain reading this tweet. I want to pull it up here just so I have the right wording, but basically Aria tweeted and said that Jerry Stackhouse after the game said that he played the older guys longer than normal because he wanted the margin of victory to look nice, because he thought that their net needed to be a little bit higher in their metrics and things like that. I said, well, you're just now thinking about that? Why haven't we heard a quote like this 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago? Like another series of quotes where you hear that and you feel like you just lost a brain cell. So from Coach Stackhouse. So
It's,
I'll find that.
It's
and
too late for that, Jerry. Like,
yeah, maybe a little bit
Yeah.
too late. That was an unreal quote, and we're back to the stat quotes again. So, but there's certainly not as many quotes as opposed to the last time we were talking about it. But guys, let's get to more of this basketball team. Before we do, though, don't forget to follow us on Twitter at @door_report and Instagram door.report. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Our podcast is available on Anchor, iTunes, Spotify, and Google Podcast. And while you're at it, give our podcast 5 stars and a review on iTunes. All right, let's talk basketball and a little bit of baseball. All right, guys, I think we basically put a bow on the LSU game. Obviously, KJ Williams had a career night. Vanderbilt's fighting for the NIT at this point. I mean, that you can say that. I mean, I don't know if they're the last 4 in right now in the NIT or if they even do that for the NIT. But right now, guys, there is kind of a silver lining, good news piece to this. If the SEC tournament started tonight, this evening, Vandy would have the 6th seed, which it's crazy to say, but they're 9-7 in the SEC. And, they're 9-7. They've got to 9 wins in the SEC for the first time since 2017. That big Florida, they swept Florida that year. That was Bryce Drew's first season. But, guys, they're the 6th seed right now. The SEC tournament started today. They would play the winner of Georgia and LSU, the 11-14 game, a game Vanderbilt's been in recently. If they win, they would play Kentucky as the 3 seed. So, obviously, that will change most likely. Realistically, Vandy will probably be either that 8 or 9 seed when it's all said and done, unless they find a way to beat either Mississippi State or Kentucky. But Mississippi State's going to be fighting for their tournament lives, and Kentucky is red hot. So, guys, that moves us into the Florida game a little bit. Vandy beats Florida 88-72, 16-13 overall, 9-7 in the SEC, 87 in the net. So it feels like they haven't moved for about a month in the net. So that's, but the LSU loss, there's no excuse anymore for where they're at in the net. Guys, last time Vandy won back-to-back games against Florida was 2017, Bryce Drew's first season, which was a really good season looking back. And the last time they won 9-conference game, also that team there, over 10,000 announced attendance again, guys, surprisingly good. And you mentioned it, Will, at the top. Could you imagine the noise level in that gym if they would have beaten LSU? I mean, my goodness, that the roof would have exploded. 6 players in double figures against Florida. They shot 52% from the field, 42% from 3. That would have been nice against LSU. Liam Robbins, it's kind of funny, guys. We're at the point now with Liam where 18 and 9 and 5 blocks is sort of a quieter night. I mean, he's had, it seems like double doubles every single night. And I mean, he has carried this team. And he's probably going to break the single season block record. He's got 82 blocks this season. That's the 3rd most behind Luke Cornett, who has 84, Festus at 87. So that record he'll probably pass Luke. I mean, I would guess, but Festus is going to be a little bit tougher. He needs 5 to pass Festus. So, and he just had 5 against Florida. So the Festus record might be a little bit tougher. Guys, Ezra Manjon, 15 points. Tyron Lawrence had 13. This is a game, guys, that where was this against LSU? Now, I know it's easy to say after the fact, but they looked like a very good team. I don't know if you say tournament team, but this was a dominant performance, and the first dominant performance all season, really. I mean, you could go back to maybe some of the non-conference games, but this is the first time they have dominated an SEC opponent, and they've had opportunities to do that. They had an opportunity to do that against South Carolina. They had an opportunity to do that against, I mean, even who's another lower tier SEC team? Florida. Ole Miss. You got that one. So, this was a convincing, dominant win where they controlled. I mean, you could say that South Carolina game, I guess, in Columbia, but
they dominated, but they didn't play that well. That was the part of that game that was weird. That's why I was so confident in the LSU game. Is because they came out there, really didn't play very well.
They gave you
against that South Carolina team, who's also kind of at the bottom end, I would say very comparable in where they are overall talent-wise to LSU, and they beat the shit out of them with their C- game. And so I just thought absolutely no way in that situation they would come out and play.
And then Ole Miss.
It wasn't even
beat LSU on Saturday.
I also weekend. I just do want to add this in because I've been very negative, but I understand that LSU and Williams, I mean, he went crazy. He was just unconscious, unstoppable.
Yeah.
basketball is a weird sport. Okay. Sometimes a worser team can beat the more talented team on any given night if the shots are falling. I know that caveat. But that doesn't excuse it. Like it doesn't make the impact any less. So like I get Vanderbilt, if Williams doesn't hit 3 or 4 threes in a row at the end of the game there that were pretty tough shots, like maybe Vanderbilt's able to pull that one out. I understand, it's a sport that the ball can bounce a million different ways, but it doesn't change the fact that ended basically this new goal that had just been created and kind of actually not just a goal, but fully there. The opportunity was there. And then poof, as soon as mysteriously as it appeared, it was gone. And so Vanderbilt on the Joe Lenardi thing was like one last little ad, like on its whole own separate line. I think it was Lenardi.
That was a fun 72 hours.
Yeah. On the outside looking in, and then they're gone. I mean, there's no buzz, no national buzz, no anything. They had just picked it up, man. And it's so frustrating to see that happen.
I thought you said it perfectly just then. Just as mysteriously as they won 5 games in a row, they mysteriously lost to LSU on the road. Like that's been the Stackhouse era. If you go back, I mean, last season, I think down the stretch, we were confident in that team. We didn't think they're going to make a tournament, the tournament, but say, hey, SEC tournament run, let's go make an NIT run. And it was a fun NIT run, but guys, there's just nothing to hang your hat on with this era, and not just this season, but the entire Stackhouse era. I know, it went through the worst season in history and had to bounce back from that. But at this point, you're there, and there's no excuses anymore for a performance like that LSU game. I mean,
no,
Trevor, you go back and look at some of Stallings, games where, the inexcusable losses. I don't remember him with this bad of a loss. I mean, he had a long career at Vanderbilt, maybe down the stretch, but like this is a game that this can't happen.
I was thinking, I kid you not, it was like the other day I was thinking about like before like Jerry and before Bryce with Kevin, bad Vanderbilt basketball losses that I can remember. And I don't even remember this team's name. But it was a 2012 season to where Jeff Taylor and all them, Vanderbilt was like number
Cleveland
7 in the
State.
Nation. That it was a Sunday game.
I remember
against
that.
Cleveland State.
Yep.
That's the one. I remember because it was a Sunday. I was like, why the hell are we playing basketball on a Sunday? And that was a really, really bad loss. But Vanderbilt still ended up having a
right. They could afford that. That's the difference. Yeah.
But this is the way I think we need to view Jerry. And I think this is a fair way to view Jerry. And I don't think this is disrespectful to any of the work that he and this staff have contributed to this program. But I think this is how Vanderbilt fans and hopefully the brass view him is he took over a program that was literally in the cellar. I mean, it was really bad.
Yep.
The way we need to view the Jerry Stackhouse era is he's not the guy who's going to take you back to Kevin Stallings level basketball, but we need to view him as the guy who stabilized it and got you out of the gutter and got you on a stable level ground to where somebody else can come in and build upon that. And I don't think that's disrespectful to Jerry. I don't think that's disrespectful to any of the staff, but that's how we need to view him. I want to see Jerry succeed. I just don't think he can, but give him credit. This program was in a very, very bad state, and he's brought them back to where like things aren't shaky anymore. And now you have the opportunity to get somebody in here who can build upon it while you at least have some sort of momentum. And so whenever you look at the Stackhouse era, like we said, like there's not like I think last year the NIT run, like that was a big deal for us. Like that was like, okay, we have legitimate momentum. This is a great step forward for Vanderbilt basketball. You had high expectations going into the season. You took a step back. Granted, you lost your star and Scottie Pippen, but nevertheless, you still had expectations. I think that's one thing that if you're Stackhouse, that you can hang your hat on, that you took a really, really bad program and you brought them some sort of consistency in that you're winning SEC ball games. You know what I mean? And I think that's fair. And I think that's a great way to look at it.
This is the only take I think I've ever had on this podcast that I like really wish I could go back and erase, but I can't, is the fire Jerry Stackhouse take, because I just didn't expect this win streak, to happen, but it did. Fantastic. So I'm not on the fire Jerry. So yeah, I'm not on the fire Jerry Stackhouse terrain, and I don't want the comments that I made about the LSU loss to seem that way. But I do not want to sound like the fan bases that I constantly make fun of, that think you can go from being literally, and I say literally as literally, the worst team in the conference for consecutive seasons, and turn that into an SEC contender with a double bye, as the expectation in 4 years. You just don't. It's not that easy. I mean, I think that Vanderbilt fans have a little bit, and it's not a bad thing, of that SEC traditional football fan base.
We're spoiled a little bit.
We deserve better than this. We are a better program than this. Why is this team losing like this? And it's kind of like people that don't go to the gym for like 2 years, and they're like, I used to be able to bench 315 pounds, and I'm like, well, you can't anymore, but you can go in and start at 135 and improve, and then you're at 185, and that's better than 135. It's not as good as 315, but I think right now Vanderbilt's probably benching 225 for one rep. I think that they've got the combine number. They've got one rep in them, and it's a respectable weight. If your bench max is 225, nobody's going to do. It's not great. It's nothing that anybody's going to be like, I bench 225 pounds, but it's respectable. And I think you were right, Trevor. I think he stabilized the program. We'll see if in the offseason there's any roster movement with some of the interesting playing time and roles that guys have had. But you're going to lose Liam Robbins. You're going to lose Ezra Mignon, I believe. So you're going to lose basically your two best players, and definitely Liam Robbins. I mean, he's gone regardless because he's going to be
he's going to the league.
But you're losing your best player and the cornerstone to your team. So that's going to happen to you again, and that's just high-level college basketball. Your best player goes to the NBA, and that's just how it goes. So that's something that Stackhouse has to get used to, prepare for. All college coaches have to deal with that. And next season, it's hard to look at that roster and see a team that is going to be better than this year. And I think that is why I was so key on this team making the tournament this season, because the next year, if they were unable to improve, and with Liam gone, that's going to be really, really tough to replace a 7'1" shot blocker in the paint that can also shoot threes and runs your entire offense basically as the key man in the pick and roll, pick and pop action. And that's going to be tough to replace.
Yeah.
And so next season, NCAA tournament, probably going to be an even tougher path next year. And so not being in the tournament in year 5 is a little bit tougher to defend as saying there's improvement, because you already improved to that point last season, this season, and then the next season. That feels like stagnation, and then you're just kind of stuck in this place of mediocrity, which is better than going 0-18, but it's definitely not the place this Vanderbilt program wants to be.
And everything you guys just said, I agree with everything you guys said. That leads us to the question of, has Vanderbilt basketball under Coach Stackhouse hit a ceiling? Have they reached their ceiling? Is their ceiling a hot run down the stretch and another showing in the NIT? Is that the ceiling? Now, it could be. I tend to think it is, but and I hate saying this, guys. I really do, because before this season, I remember saying, Will and I, when we did the preview, we talked about the expectations for the season. We said it's an NCAA tournament or bust type season. I mean, that's what it felt like. I'm not backtracking on that at all. I'm still staying strong in that. But what I'm saying is, I think next season is sort of the stamp official. You don't make the tournament, you're gone. And I think that now, but then again, I feel like some of us said that before this season. So that's the sort of the conundrum that, the 5-game win streak, that showed that you have the talent, you have the roster, you have the pieces to win. But you look at the losses, say Vanderbilt beats LSU on the road last week. Say they are able to beat Grambling State at home. They're sitting at 18-11 and 10-6, I think, in the SEC. 10-6. So 11 so I mean, so you look at that and it's like they're a bubble team at that point. You're able to find a way to get those two quad 4 wins. I guess those are quad 4 losses at this point, right? The LSU was quad 4, maybe quad 3, but that's neither here nor there. But at the same time, guys, they have the pieces and like they have the talent, but they did not perform when they absolutely had to. They absolutely had to in Baton Rouge, and they didn't. And we've had to say that too many times. I know it's year 4, and I know next year we could be saying something different, but I'm with you guys. I just don't see it. I don't see how are they.
That opinion. I just want to throw out there that's not my take. Like I don't think it's cap. I think that Stack has potential to recruit in a level of players similar to what Bryce Drew brought in bringing in 5-star guys, because and I'm just going to say this statement right now because I think we've mentioned it before, but I don't think it gets quite enough attention. He's Jerry Stackhouse. That's kind of cool. Like if you're a high school recruit, like, who am I going to go play for? Some 58-year-old white dude or Jerry fucking Stackhouse, who's a 95 player on NBA 2K and whatever the kids are playing nowadays. Like, I think that Stack or Jerry came in very inexperienced and green behind the ears as a coach, not as a player, but as a coach. And he'd coached in the G League, and that's just not the same because you're not building anything in the G League. Like, it is the opposite of building. Like, every single player in the G League doesn't want to be there, and they're playing to not be there. It's not really the case in college. Like, you're trying to build a cultural winning program. And I think he kind of underestimated that because he is Jerry Stackhouse and he just thought it would kind of naturally come along with it. I think you've seen improvement. Like, I don't think he's a very good in-game coach right now as far as managing the game. I think he draws up great set plays at the end of game when that situation arrives, but he doesn't seem to have good control of timeout usage and when to rotate guys in and out. You see a lot of struggling with this team after subs come in to get in rhythm together for whatever reason. I don't know why that is. I don't have metrics to back it up. I have the metrics of I've watched every game and watched this team go on runs with certain lineups on the court, and then another lineup comes on the court and they don't score a bucket for 4 minutes. I can't explain it. I don't know why it is, but I think that Jerry can bring in guys. I think he can bring in legit recruits, and I think he will keep getting better as a coach. The real question was Kevin Stallings more of a modern aberration of Vanderbilt? I think that Vanderbilt is a long way away right now from being where they were in 2012. I think that this generation has never seen Vanderbilt. So they're like reset back to square one, because in the entire age of social media, Vanderbilt basketball has never truly been relevant. They've actually been awful for the entire social media age. The exact opposite is true of Vanderbilt baseball. Look what's happened there. So has Vanderbilt basketball missed the bus is kind of what I'm saying. Are they like UT football? Are they kind of like yesterday's news kind of thing, like we've said before, that really resets back to where you're just another basketball program in a power conference that's went to some Sweet 16s back in the day and won an SEC championship about a decade ago, and nobody really looks twice, and they have kind of a cool stadium that pops up when you Google search cool basketball gyms. So I don't know if it's a Jerry Stackhouse thing necessarily. I think it's just this program has had a horrendous stretch, and now it's kind of being placed on by me as well, and I'll admit it, but the issues are being placed on the coach. Some deservedly so, I will say, but the issues are being placed on the coach when overall the cap, I think, that's being talked about might be more just the state of the program and really where they are and how long it's been since they've been relevant.
Yeah, well, look at Kermit Davis at Ole Miss. This was his 5th year at Ole Miss. He was just fired. He was let go. He made the tournament. He took Ole Miss to the NCAA tournament in his first year. Had a talented team, but went 4 years without making the tournament. At a program in Ole Miss that doesn't have a lot of tradition. I mean, I don't even know how many times they've been to the tournament. They're not, in Alabama or a Tennessee or a Kentucky at the basketball level. But 5 years, I look at that 5-year mark. I think Vanderbilt, but then again, for Vanderbilt, I've been saying Vandy has a standard. But I do get what you're saying, Will. Has that standard sort of evaporated or disappeared or slipped?
And I don't know if that was really my take. That was more of like a question. Like that was really more like out there kind of, what do you guys think?
And here's where I'm at with it. I think the standard has slipped. I think that the standard, if this was, say this, let's say Bryce Drew ended up keeping Darius Garland healthy and they made the NCAA tournament, but he goes, so now the expectations are set to make the tournament every year. He goes 3 straight years of missing the tournament. I know this is 2020 past, Darius Garland, he obviously got hurt, but I just think the standards, like in the Stallings era, most of the Stallings era was seeing Vanderbilt in the NCAA tournament. I mean, that was almost an every year thing, other than his last several years and the first few years of Stallings. He struggled out of the gate and then got rolling. That's where I'm at. I don't see a standard anymore. And it's hard to describe why I feel that way, but I just think the standard has slipped. And if Vanderbilt had a standard after that Alabama game, there would have been, an ultimatum of, we need something big here. And they got it. That's the crazy thing. They got a 5-game winning streak, but then you revert right back to where you were in a loss at Baton Rouge. At LSU, a team around 150 in the net. So I think they're right back to where they were. I know they beat Florida. Good job beating Florida again. But I don't know. I think you got to win these next 2 games to really feel confident about next season. Not saying even if they, especially if they lose, I'm certainly not confident about next season. But even if they win, I'm like, okay, it's another NIT berth. So for me, guys, to answer your question, well, I think the standard has slipped. And I'm not saying, after that Alabama game, if they were to have fired Coach Stackhouse, which I don't think would have even happened or even been possible of happening, then okay, standard's back. We're back. But I don't know. I don't know what you think, Trevor, but I think the standard has slipped. Maybe next year changes my mind. Maybe they make the tournament and we were all wrong about, or at least I was wrong about Stack. But that's where I'm at. I just think the standard of Vanderbilt basketball has slipped a little bit.
And that's the thing too, it's frustrating because you don't even know like really what the goal is from the outside looking in. Like obviously the fans want NCAA tournaments, but you don't know like inside of the program like what success is to them.
Right.
And I will say this too. Jerry had a very difficult task with being a new head coach and having to rebuild a very, very, very bad Vanderbilt basketball program. I'll try and compare it to football. If Clark Lea was in year 4 and he had not made a bowl game yet, how would we talk about Clark Lea? And it's a lot.
5 means a lot. Year 5 is big. Is what I think we'd be saying.
And it's a lot easier, generally speaking, even if your basketball program is bad, it's a lot easier to turn around a basketball program than it is a football.
Right. Let me go off that.
You
Trevor,
can get it in 2 classes. Like you can get competitive in 2 classes.
Yeah. And I completely agree with you. Let me go off of that and go to Clark Lea. This was year 2. Year 2 after the absolute rock bottom worst Vanderbilt football has ever been. Ever. Mm-hmm. I mean, we know what happened. In year 2, you go 5-7 with 2 SEC wins. And I know the Tennessee loss put a bad taste in your mouth, but you go 5-7 in a year that we were saying, 3, maybe 4 wins. They go 5-7. So all of a sudden the expectations in year 2 rise. Now year 3, you expect a bowl game for Jerry Stackhouse after, I guess you could argue the worst. Yeah. Not even argue. That was the worst basketball season in history. You can't, there's no arguing that.
There had never been a 20-loss season in the history of Vanderbilt basketball. I just want to say that before recent, very recent seasons.
We're comparing this. These are the same thing we're comparing. The worst season in Vanderbilt football history and the worst basketball season ever. Clark Lea in year 2 puts Vanderbilt 1 win away from a bowl game. Jerry Stackhouse in year 4 isn't even sniffing the NCAA tournament. Yep. I think that's where we're at, guys.
And that's where my frustration
I would almost argue. Yeah. I would almost argue a little bit to that basically Jerry Stackhouse has gone 5-7 the last 2 seasons. I would argue that these last 2 seasons are the
but they haven't. They weren't on the bubble though.
Yeah, they are.
Like last year, they weren't on the bubble.
Okay,
they were on the bubble for 72 hours.
But a basketball season is how many games, Billy? About 30 to 35 games.
Yeah.
Okay. A football season, 12 games. So each basketball game weighted about 3. Vanderbilt, if they would have not lost to Grambling and if they would have not lost LSU, would be hard on the bubble right now. So I would say they're 2 performances away from basically being in the NCAA tournament or having that opportunity right now and probably being there.
That's the thing. That's the thing.
They're right there. They're
not
NIT eligible. I would describe NIT teams as the 5-7 teams that are like eligible for the like teams that drop out or they can't fill spots for the academic eligibility of teams that go 5-7 and go into bowl games. That's how the NIT feels for me. Jerry is right there. He just can't put it all together through an entire season. 5-7 is a lot easier. I don't want to hate on what Clark Lea has done, okay? Because it was spectacular to turn that program to winning 2 SEC games and going 5-7. Unreal. But 5-7 is a lot easier than 6-6 and making it to a bowl game. There are a lot of Vanderbilt teams that have won 4 and 5 games and gotten trapped in that cycle. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but it is very easy to be on the bubble, Jerry. It's very easy for Jerry Stackhouse teams to be in this conversation like 1 or 2 games, 1 or 2 losses away. But taking that next step is really, really tough. And I think that Clark Lea, I've said it before, but it's kind of like when companies will have a round of funding and it's too high. Their valuation is too high, and then they go for their 3rd round, like Clark Lea's 3rd season, and now that's the expectation. Is anything below 5-7 in year 3 now is going to feel like a failure, and probably anything below a bowl game is going to feel like a failure. This team would have gone 3-9, still beat the Vegas win expectation last year in football, and then goes 5-7 in year 3, you'd probably be feeling pretty good, like there's positive momentum. I think the same is true for Jerry Stackhouse, and not making excuses, but for Jerry Stackhouse and this team, that if they had never made that run at the end of the year, had just kind of done normal, if they hadn't made the run to be in the NIT, to win some games there, get Memorial going, get our juices flowing for this upcoming basketball season, if that had never happened, I don't think we'd be sitting here saying how Jerry, he's probably capped at this, because it would look like step progression that would be easy to reconcile an upward trajectory. Now it just feels like he's flatlining because you're sitting in the same spot you were last year. And I'm not saying that's wrong. I think that is potential that they could flatline here and have 3 straight years of being kind of a bubble team. And that could be frustrating and maybe be the end of it. But I think he's almost captured by his own success of last season a little bit, of that late game stretch. And now people are frustrated that the same thing is happening again. You're hot at the end of the year, but it's not enough. And so I think just the big jump can sometimes be a little bit of a trap. And I'm not meaning to defend Jerry. I've been quite critical of Stackhouse, but I feel like I'm kind of taking that role here of like, he has pulled the program from winning 0 SEC games to winning 9 SEC games, potentially 10 or 11. And that's a hell of a feat. And I don't want to diminish that. But Trevor, take what I was going to say here.
It just and I totally agree that he really does deserve a lot of credit, that he has brought Vanderbilt back from like a historic dump. I could be wrong, and I really do hope that I'm wrong. But it just, like you said, it feels like that this season has hit a wall, and and this is just my peanut brain. It's hard for me to think that if in year 4 it's the second year of him hitting like this wall of a bubble team, especially whenever it's a little bit easier to turn a program around in basketball. I just don't see how year 5, or God forbid even year 6, it's going to be like a big jump. Like I want to be wrong. I really do, but I can't see it. And so that's why I think that he's hit a wall. And I think that's okay. I think
and I'll kind of
he's done a really good job of making it stable. And I don't want to just say like, oh, all he's done is made it stable. Like that is a huge deal. Like Bryce Drew left this program literally in shambles. And just like I said, I don't want to crap on him because he's hitting a wall, but just even getting to the wall is a big deal with how bad the program was. I just don't know if he can get through that wall, and I hope I'm wrong, but I feel like if he could, he would have done it by now. Is basically where I'm at.
That's where I'm at too. And guys, I think recruiting has been huge too. Like, you look at recruiting this year. We came into this season looking at a guy like Noah Shelby as a guy that can maybe step up in that rotation and play well and play a lot. I mean, a decent amount. And he hasn't really played at all in the SEC. I mean, you saw him a little bit occasionally, but the guy that has stepped up is Colin Smith. And it really, sort of turned into the player we thought he could be. Lee Dort, of course, has been hurt. I think if in this offseason, if Noah Shelby and Lee Dort come back, that's a big sign, sort of, continue of the stabilization. I know you're losing Liam Robbins, and I feel like we're recapping the season at this point. But guys, I'm with you, Trevor, in saying that if it hasn't happened now, will it ever happen? Will that NCAA tournament berth ever happen?
Yeah.
We may never know. We may know come this time next season, but we haven't seen it yet. That's where we're at. And I think you texted us this, Trevor, and we'll get to some baseball talk here in a second, but I thought you were spot on with the brass and the administration. He has done enough for him to get another year. I mean, he has. And he has. And I'm not saying from if you put us as the administration, I was not saying that.
Jerry Stackhouse will be back next year.
He is
confirmed.
Jerry Stackhouse will be back.
And
I will keep my personal opinion to myself.
Look, I'm not saying. Look, he will be back. I don't personally know, and I'm not like I'm in the middle still, probably leaning towards the he's not the guy train, if we're being honest. But I haven't fully jumped into that yet because Noah Shelby does have talent. Lee Dort's talented. Like
that's a great point.
Like there's some talent.
These kids have some real flash.
So that's where I'm just kind of holding off, just because once they graduate, these guys, what the potential could be just with the talent level that's already on the roster. So I'm holding off, but it would be hard to justify firing Stack from a completely macro perspective.
Yes.
Like not an internal Vanderbilt of knowing what has happened in the flow of the season and the quotes and whatever. Just macro, look at the record when he got here and look at what it's done in conference play and out of conference play overall, but specifically in SEC play, and look at his win percentage, win total. It would be really hard to justify firing a guy and whatever buyout is there. Just on the outside. I mean, especially after you had the controversial firing, even though it needed to happen, of Bryce Drew. Quick, I mean, it would be tough to bring in a coach at that point. Like, just be like, I'm not interviewing there. They're just quick to the trigger. I mean, you don't. So I think that would put them in a really bad spot financially and just optics on the outside. And that's the last thing this program needs.
I agree with that, Will. But then again, I think next year is the year. I think next year is the year to sort of say, okay, Jerry, this is year 5. And if you still haven't made the NCAA tournament, it's sort of time. I mean, this is the time. I mean, you just saw Ole Miss. They made a move. I'm not trying to compare, but Ole Miss is a program that Ole Miss and Vandy standards should not be the same, but they are. So that's sort of where we're at, guys. We're going to have this huge conversation in the offseason and sort of we've already started the talk of the Stackhouse era. We will keep it going after this season. Whatever happens down the stretch of the season, there's still a lot of basketball to be played. They got a trip to Rupp Arena on Wednesday, Kentucky, and then Mississippi State at home on Saturday, 7:30. And so Kentucky and Mississippi State, a couple of top 40 net teams that are playing for seeding in March. I mean, Mississippi State's a team they're going to be playing for an actual berth.
They're going to be playing hard basketball.
Yeah.
Buckle up for an absolute boxing match.
Yeah, that'll be fun basketball to watch. And I think Vanderbilt getting LSU sort of out of your system to a degree is maybe good for this team. At this point, maybe they start another win streak. But
before we go on, let me just say, this will be the last thing I say about talk about me going absolutely insane. If somehow Vanderbilt goes 3-1, but the one loss is to LSU, talk about I would legitimately I would put my
we didn't even talk about that as a potential scenario.
A possibility.
That's the thing about it. We kept saying Kentucky or Mississippi State. It could be one of those. But so maybe you can blame it on us. All right, guys, let's get to some of the fan comments and questions. I know, there's still a lot of basketball to be talked about. We've got plenty of time for that. Before we get to some of the fan questions, though, as I find this sponsorship, sponsored by Promise Bank, Kennedy Mathis, loan officer. Kennedy has a passion for assisting families and realizing their dreams of home ownership. Contact him at 931-224-7684 or email him at Kennedy.Mathis@primusbank.com. Apply for a mortgage at primusbank.com. They've got a solution for you: cash out refinance, first-time home buyer, and much more. Again, give them a call at 931-224-7684. All right, guys, we got a few questions here. We answered Braden's already. Would a win at Rupp and a victory over a top 4 seed in the SEC tournament be enough to get the doors in the big dance? We all said no. So we can agree on that. Miller McKee chimes in. He says, "Is Trevor Hulan the new Vandy Lance?" That's a good question.
I haven't gotten any trouble with Vandy police yet. So,
well, that was kind of the end of Vandy Lance, though. That was the end of it.
Vandy police. If you ever see me, stay away from me. Don't come near me.
The thing
I
about
don't care how many people complain. Don't come near me.
The thing about Vandy Lance and what separated him was the fact that he was so different than every other Vandy fan. He's this, redneck coming in from, probably a country area of the state.
God knows. And, knows the place that Vandy Lance came from.
And he's repping Vandy from head to toe. And he's screaming at LSU fans. I remember going to a baseball game and literally hearing a verbal altercation between Vandy Lance and some older LSU fans.
People are covering their kids' ears because they're like, "By God, it's Vandy Lance." Cover your ears, kids.
But God,
that's Vandy Lance's music.
That's what Vandy doesn't have right now in their fan base, and I think there's some reasoning for that. There's not a lot of winning at the two sports that matter.
You got to be a real degen to cheer for Vanderbilt the past couple of years.
That could
audibly
be you, though,
too.
Trev. That could be you, the new Vandy Lance.
This will be the cross I carry. If this is my cross to carry, then I'll just let the rough end drag, and I'll be the villain for Vandy athletics if that's what it takes.
Scott,
God forbid I ever get escorted out of a game.
That would be a first.
That Scott would be a first. Twitter, yes.
Vandy baseball. Well, as we get into baseball here, they look like an Omaha team. If the bats can slowly get going, Vastine looks like the best player on the team, not named EBJ. And I would agree with that. Jonathan Vastine. I know Will. You sort of wanted out on the baseball talk a little bit, but I know you can chime in on a little bit here. But Trevor, I know you were at two of the UCLA games.
I was at one UCLA game, and I was at the Central Arkansas game last Tuesday. I was at the Saturday UCLA game, in which they lost. And I thought that going to the Central Arkansas game after work would be a fun post-work treat to see Vanderbilt beat up on some rinky-dink school. And alas, they lost. So
you need to stop going.
I was saying earlier, to Billy, it's I have the pleasure of cheering for legitimately like a dynasty in college baseball, and I cannot see these guys win in person, and it pisses me off.
We don't need you
Like, it
anymore.
makes me so mad.
But so Trevor was there, so we'll get into that a little bit. Yeah, I agree with Scott there. Vestine looks really good. Friday, Trevor, they shut out UCLA 6-0. Saturday, UCLA came back and beat Vandy 3-0. And then Sunday, Vandy got the win 2-1. Their starters this weekend, their 3 starters on the mound, they went 15 and 1/3 innings, no runs, 18 strikeouts. That's how their starters fared. Carter Holton on Friday, Hunter Owen on Saturday, and then Devin Futrell on Sunday. Guys, I thought Enrique making history was the story of the weekend. I mean, he broke Charles DeFrance's all-time stolen base record with the 97th. That's ridiculous saying that. Steal of his career. It's his 3rd year. I mean, guys, I realized this after the game. He's going to go down as one of the best position players in program history. I mean, top 5, I think. I mean, he's up there with Pedro Alvarez, Tony Kemp, and Dansby at least already. And now, I mean, depending on what he does this year, you could argue, the best, depending on what he does this year. So I thought that was a big takeaway. Davis Diaz, Trevor, I tweeted about Davis Friday night, I think it was. He came up with a big hit. Last year,
got a great bat.
Yeah, he really struggled last year, though, as a freshman. He played a lot to replace Carter Young when he was hurt. Last year, he hit .213, 37 strikeouts, 2 home runs, and only 20 RBIs. But he was a freshman. Starting as in the SEC as a freshman is tough. This year, he's already hitting .240, 6 hits, 1 home run, 7 RBIs. He's slugging .440. He's getting on base, and he's limiting the strikeouts so far. So, Trevor, that's what I would say about Davis. They need him to step up because he really struggled last year as a freshman. We know what he's going to give you defensively, but if he can give you that offensively, you'll be fine. And then one other takeaway, Nick Maldonado. And I know you agree with this. I know you probably saw this well on Twitter. He was nails in the final 3 innings on Sunday, 11th career save. I mean, he put the team on his back. He said, "Boys, we're winning this series." On
that
Sunday.
Was so. Let your nuts hang baseball right there. I mean, it was like 12 strikeouts and I don't even
Did you guys see
how many did he pitch? Like 4 innings or something, like 3 innings.
I think it was 3.
No, it was 8 strikeouts. It was 8 strikeouts.
Yeah,
but just something ridiculous. He looks so good. I will say about Davis Diaz too. Last year, he did struggle, but I will say last year, the staff knew that they had to let him get looks and at bats because even though his strikeout percentage was high and his OBP and his batting average weren't that great, everybody knew that like his bat has pop. Right. And if you just keep last year, if you just keep letting him get looks and get real-time ABs, he's going to start to put stuff together. And I think he's going to have a absolute breakout season this year.
He's a big X factor for them.
Yes.
And guys, they're up. Vandy's up to number 7 overall in D1 baseball's top 25. They were at number 10, so they moved up a few spots. And I know this is early, to even be talking about rankings, but they've got Austin P on Tuesday. Trevor's
my alma mater.
Trevor's alma mater. I wonder if they're playing Tennessee Tech
Tuesday.
At all. Canberra College Classic this weekend in Minneapolis. Guys, this is at US Bank Stadium where the Vikings play. That's where they're playing this weekend. And I'm going to try to get Rhett Wiseman on sometime later this week to talk a little VandyBoys and about that series. But in right field, you guys know the dimensions at the Hawk right now. I think it's 315 in left where the Big Green Monster is, but it's like 330 in right. At US Bank Stadium, it's 300 in right field. So look out for Shrek and some of those right-handed bats lifting it out of that stadium. Friday, they got Nebraska at 11 a.m., Saturday, Maryland at 11 a.m., and then Sunday, Minnesota at 6 p.m. Big Ten Network Plus. I can't say I've watched a single game on Big Ten Network Plus at all. So Vandy fans, if you really want to watch those games, get Big Ten Network Plus. However,
it's about the same as Flow. Yeah, you already spent money on Flow Sports. You might as well spend money on Big Ten Network Plus.
Yeah. I suffered the blow of $30.
I have an idea. What if a company packaged together all of these sports streaming products, and you could put it in a box and attach that box to your TV, and you'd pay a flat rate for all of these. It would put them all in one place.
I feel like I've heard that
something
before.
Like, you could call it something like a
cable
bundle. I don't know.
Cable.
That just seems
what
like
the
a
hell
good
is
idea to
cable?
me instead of all these
wireless
independent
now.
streaming service. Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I'm shocked nobody's tried that yet, but
I will say, Billy, I forget who asked. I think it was Scott about Jonathan Vastine.
Yes, yeah.
Another player other than Vastine who I've been really impressed with, RJ Austin
Yep.
has
Yep.
had some really, really good plate
Yep.
appearances so far. I mean, he's on the season.
He's a freshman.
He's slashing 346 batting average, OBP of 414, and he's slugging 385.
Ooh.
I mean, one stolen base, 6 strikeouts. I mean, that's just the nature of baseball now.
Yeah.
Dudes who rake are going to strike out.
pitching
They're
is
going up
unreal.
there swinging. The pitching, another thing, UCLA, their weekend starters, they had really, really solid pitching. I do agree they need to wake up the bats. That was another thing that they struggled with last year was offensive production. I mean, it's frustrating because that Vanderbilt has the bats that they can just make contact with the ball. I'm hoping that it is just a little bit of it. It is the start of the season, and like you have to let some rust sort of shake off, and then going up against at the Globe Life Series to where you have to face TCU, who you can make the argument is one of the best baseball teams in America right now.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have Oklahoma State, and then you have Texas. I mean, that's a hell of an opening.
Yeah. And now you bring in UCLA now. I mean, that's a hell of a start to the season.
That is a tough start for a college baseball program. So I'm hoping they wake up. I think they will. I'm going to lean a little bit more optimistic and say that it's just rust. It's also Alan Espinal season. It seems like after this weekend series, he's going to be the main guy behind the dish instead of Jack Bulger, which is great because Alan Espinal is
he's an explosive bat.
He's one of those baseball talents that's if you're not a baseball and you're not like big into professional baseball, he's not in. This is how I can best explain it. He's got the talent and the raw power, I think, that a lot of guys who go to college don't have because they either are international draft picks from Latin America or the Dominican Republic, or they just go straight out of high school.
Right.
And Vandy fans have a lot of fun watching Alan Espinal behind the dish. He's really good defensively, and he's that like modern day, not even modern day, almost like that like Adley Rushman kind of can do literally both, could be great defensively and has an incredible bat.
Mm-hmm.
I have a lot of fun watching him. Jack Bulger, he's going to DH a lot. He's great to have as a backup. He's a great utility guy.
Him. Yeah.
Nothing against him, but Alan Espinal is an unusual talent to be playing college baseball, just to be frank.
Yeah, I mean, he's the better bat. And so I think Espinal will make a difference. Well, any baseball takes before we wrap up here?
I think it's the same take. This might be our third baseball season. I'm not sure that we've had this podcast, but it's why I don't early in the season watch or really get into Vanderbilt baseball this early. It's for one reason, because every year the same conversations are had, and every year Tim Corbin is just kind of tinkering with it. Mm-hmm. And the only reason I have that take is because, number one, out of conference non-SEC college baseball is tough to watch for me. I mean, I like baseball. I grew up playing it, but it's just until it gets into SEC play, I don't know. It all just feels kind of like whatever to me. It all feels kind of like a scrimmage, just a little bit in college baseball. It's kind of like tuning up for the stuff that matters. It's what college basketball is the opposite of, what we were talking about earlier. But every year, Tim Corbin, there are always issues. Some years they're able to be resolved, but I think he almost is trying to figure out where the issues are, and then he is attempting to solve them throughout the year. And that's what it looks like, just completely on the outside. And the only reason he's allowed to do that is because of one thing: winning. You can do whatever you want, and I will pretty much just be like, he's got it in hand.
In
if you are
Corbs,
a
I trust.
proven, consistent winner. And right now, that's what Tim Corbin is. So right now, in Corbin, I trust. Basically, until SEC play starts, you're just not going to hear these detailed criticisms from me, because I think Corbin is recognizing these criticisms and actively working to fix any criticism and 1,000 more criticisms than I could ever bring up on the podcast. I don't feel that way about basketball and football. So
that's the thing. I think for a lot of Vandy fans, they get so excited for baseball because they know that's the winning product, that that's the two natties. It's like
is what I usually do.
Yeah,
and I will say too, for Vandy baseball fans, I did see Vanderbilt is not. I think last year, I don't think they lost a midweek game at all. I could be wrong. I don't think they did.
You might be right there. Maybe one, but I think they won. Yeah.
Like this Central Arkansas game, I don't think anybody's talking about it, but it's just the nature of baseball.
It doesn't matter.
Like, don't freak out
the next
about
day,
it.
The next day, they won 13-1 against UAB.
This stuff happens all the time. Like, it's just, you just shrug it off. Also, too, I haven't played baseball in forever, but it's my favorite sport. For those of you who don't know, it's really tough to play baseball in cold weather. Like, it's just the ball grip's different. If you're a pitcher, it really does. It feels a lot different. Swinging in aluminum or a composite or a BB core bat in the cold literally hurts
Not
like
fun.
hell. Like, you can wear 40,000 pairs of baseball gloves and it freaking sucks. So I think that's another thing too. You just have to wait for the weather to warm up and then they'll kind of get in their groove. And so
this happens. It happens every year.
It is like
every
listening to a different podcast during baseball season, because it's so much more forgiving and lenient of like coaching quote unquote mistakes and different things, because we're just like, it doesn't feel like Tim Corbin makes the same mistake multiple times. And it feels like if he makes it a second time, he's not making that mistake a third time. And so I don't feel like I need to hammer all of these things that are done wrong. And maybe that's why, I just feel like a spoiled Vanderbilt baseball fan, because I kind of just sit back and start watching an SEC play and they're good. And I don't really have to worry about it or not. Worry about if they're going to be good. They're at least, very competitive in by far the best conference in the country.
I'm already looking ahead to that series in Knoxville, April 21st through the 23rd. That's going to be a couple top 5 teams, most likely top 10.
Tickets are already
at least
over $100.
Yeah, I'm gonna try like hell to somehow get a credential to that.
I'm gonna try
because
into that.
I'm not buying a ticket. I know I have a few buddies out there that might be able to get a ticket. If not, I'm gonna try to get a credential. But guys, that's the series this year in Knoxville, and Vanderbilt sort of reclaiming their throne. And it's weird already talking about that series. That's how much I think Vanderbilt fans are and should be excited for baseball. Not that basketball season is over, but it sort of is. And at least in the positivity minds. Right now, they still got an NIT run in them, maybe. But guys, that's baseball right now. I mean, they got a big series this weekend in Minneapolis at that football stadium. That'll be. I'm going to get that just to see what that looks like on my laptop, and maybe throw it on the TV just to see what that looks like in a football stadium. But Will, you're right about baseball. Every year after Hoover and the SEC tournament, Corbin always finds a way to get his guys right, and you feel confident about the postseason. I mean, even last year, taking the trip, it wasn't like their most dominant years, of course, but they were still in a regional and took Oregon State to the final game. Like that, he always finds a way to get his guys playing their best baseball in the postseason. That's you're right, Will, about sort of sitting back, relaxing, and being a spoiled Vandy baseball fan.
Just enjoy it,
yeah.
And Vandy fan,
because you don't get it in any other sport, that's for sure.
No.
So I enjoy it when take the dubs where they come. That should be the motto of the podcast.
Well, we got Minneapolis tournament, Cambria College Classic this weekend for the VandyBoys, and Vanderbilt basketball is in Rupp Arena Wednesday night. It's always fun watching that matchup up in Lexington. I found the stat: Vanderbilt hasn't beaten Kentucky since 2016 in any game in general. I don't even know their last win in Rupp Arena. So there's some positivity heading into that matchup, but. That does it for another beefy episode of the Doorport, powered by Alaco Fine Wood Floors for Will Byrum.
Show him the shirt,
and
Will.
Beef, there it is. Will's the beef. Had to throw it up today for episode 208. I was about to say 208, powered by Laco Fine Wood Floors. Thanks for tuning in.